Herman Webster Mudgett was born in 1861 in a quiet New Hampshire town. From a young age he showed a cold curiosity about pain and power. He tortured animals. He lied easily. He changed his name to Henry Howard Holmes, and moved through life like a man who had already decided the rules did not apply to him. In medical school he stole corpses, used them for insurance fraud, and practiced the art of looking trustworthy. By the time he reached Chicago in the late 1880s, Holmes had perfected the performance. Handsome, polite, always ready with a charming story. People wanted to believe him. That was his greatest weapon. He bought a large empty lot across from the future site of the World's Fair, and began construction on what locals simply called the castle. The castle was no ordinary hotel. Holmes designed every floor himself. There were rooms with no windows, hallways that turned back on themselves, staircases that led nowhere, doors that opened only from one side, soundproof chambers, a chute that dropped straight into the basement, a kiln large enough to destroy a human body, tanks of acid, secret passages behind ordinary-looking walls. He hired and fired workers constantly, so no one ever saw the full plan. When someone asked too many questions, they disappeared. Holmes collected insurance on the building. He collected rent from shops on the ground floor. And he waited for the fair to bring strangers into the city by the thousands. In the castle, a guest could check in under a false name, leave a forwarding address that led nowhere, and vanish without a single police report. Holmes made sure of it. Young women looking for work were his favorite targets. He offered them jobs, rooms, and kindness. Some became his employees. Some became his lovers. Many became his victims. He married several women at once under different names, took their money, and erased them when they grew suspicious. Insurance policies were another specialty. Holmes would take out policies on people close to him, arrange an accident, and collect. One associate, Benjamin Pittezel, became both partner and eventual victim. Holmes later admitted he killed Pittezel for the insurance money, and then hunted down Pittezel's children to silence them. The castle ran like a factory. Bodies were stripped of valuables, then lowered into the basement. Some were sold to medical schools. Others were burned or dissolved. Holmes kept careful records of the money, never of the names. As the World's Fair opened in 1893, the castle filled with tourists who never returned home. Newspapers later estimated the number of victims anywhere from a dozen to more than 200. The true count will never be known. Holmes himself seemed to enjoy the mystery. During the fair, the castle became a quiet landmark of death. While millions walked the white buildings of the White City and marveled at electric lights and new inventions, Holmes walked his dark corridors and selected the next guest, who would not leave. He was never in a hurry. He preferred slow methods when it suited him, locking someone in a room and letting the gas fill it, or simply waiting until the person was no longer useful. He told different stories to different people. To some he was a successful doctor. To others he was a wealthy landlord. To the police he was just another busy businessman in a booming city. Chicago was chaotic. The fair brought crowds, crime, and distraction. Missing persons reports piled up and were often ignored. Holmes moved through the noise like a man who understood exactly how invisible a smiling stranger could be. For a few short years he lived at the center of his own private empire of murder, and almost no one noticed. Greed finally tripped him. After the fair ended, Holmes left Chicago and continued his frauds across the country. He was arrested in 1894 for insurance fraud related to Benjamin Pittezel. Once in custody, the full horror began to surface. Detectives searched the castle and found the secret rooms, the acid vats, the chute, the kiln still holding human remains. Holmes confessed to 27 murders, then changed the number, then claimed innocence again. He seemed to enjoy the attention. In 1895 he was tried for the murder of Pitzel, convicted and sentenced to death. On May 7, 1896, he was hanged in Philadelphia. Even on the scaffold he remained calm. The castle was later torn down, but the story refused to die. H. Holmes became known as America's first documented serial killer, a man who turned architecture into a weapon and charm into a trap. More than a century later, the image of that quiet doctor welcoming strangers into a building designed for their disappearance still chills anyone who hears it. The lights of the World's Fair have long gone out. The castle is gone. But the warning remains. Sometimes the most dangerous places look exactly like home. After the World's Fair ended, Holmes left Chicago with Benjamin Pitezel and a new plan. Pitezel was his partner in fraud, a man who trusted him completely. Holmes convinced Pitezel to fake his own death for insurance money. Instead, Holmes killed him in Philadelphia, burned the body just enough to make identification difficult, and collected the money. But Pitezel had 3 children, Alice, Nellie, and Howard. Holmes promised their mother he would take care of them. He did not. He took the children with him across the country, moving from city to city, always one step ahead of anyone who might ask questions. In Detroit, Indianapolis, and finally Toronto, the children vanished one by one. Holmes later admitted he murdered them to keep them silent. Their small bodies were found in a basement stove and under a house. The cruelty of those killings shocked even the detectives who had already seen the castle. Holmes never told the same story twice. When police finally arrested him in Boston in November 1894, he first claimed he was innocent. Then he confessed to killing Pitezel by accident. Then he said he killed 27 people. Then he raised the number. Then he lowered it. He wrote long letters from jail filled with dramatic details, some true, many invented. He seemed to enjoy the attention. Newspapers across America printed every word. Readers could not look away from the soft-spoken doctor, who smiled while describing murder. Holmes understood something dark about people. The more terrible the story, the more they wanted to hear it. While Holmes sat in a Philadelphia jail, detectives tore apart the Chicago castle. They found the sealed rooms. They found the gas pipes that could be controlled from outside a locked door. They found the chute that dropped straight into the basement. They found the kiln with human ash still inside. They found acid vats and surgical tools. One detective later said the building felt alive with death. Neighbors who had once waved at the charming doctor now realized how many young women had walked through those doors and never returned. The castle was no longer a mystery. It was a crime scene that stretched across 3 floors and into the earth itself. In October 1895, Holmes stood trial in Philadelphia for the murder of Benjamin Pitezel. The courtroom was packed every day. People came to see the face of the man who had turned a hotel into a slaughterhouse. Holmes remained calm. He smiled at the jury. He corrected lawyers on small details. He acted as if the whole event was a misunderstanding. The evidence was overwhelming. Letters, insurance papers, the burned body, the dead children. After only a few hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty. The judge sentenced him to death by hanging. Holmes listened without emotion, as if he had expected nothing less. In the months before his execution, Holmes wrote a long confession that was published in newspapers. He claimed responsibility for 27 murders. He described methods in cold detail. Then, days later, he said most of it was lies. He said he had only killed 2 people. Then he changed the number again. No one knew what to believe. The truth was that Holmes had killed enough people to become a legend, and he seemed determined to control that legend until the very end. Even in chains, he was still performing. On May 7, 1896, Herman Webster Mudgett, known to the world as H. Holmes, walked to the gallows in Moyamensing prison. He remained steady. He spoke quietly to the guards. He did not cry or beg. When the trapdoor opened, the rope did not break his neck cleanly. He died slowly by strangulation, twisting for more than 15 minutes. Some said it was a final act of cruelty from a man who had delivered so much of it to others. Others said it was simply the imperfect justice of the time. Either way, America's first serial killer was dead. After the trial, the Chicago castle became a dark tourist attraction. People paid to walk through the rooms where so many had died. The owner tried to turn the horror into profit. But in August 1895, a fire of mysterious origin gutted the building. Some believed it was arson. Others believed the castle itself refused to remain standing. What remained was torn down. Today nothing of the original structure exists. Only photographs and old newspaper drawings keep its shape alive in memory. How many people did Holmes actually kill? He confessed to 27. Some investigators believed the real number was closer to 200. Others thought it was far lower. The truth is lost in the chaos of the World's Fair, the missing persons reports that were never properly investigated, and Holmes's own endless lies. What is certain is this: he killed enough to change how America understood evil. Before Holmes, the idea of a man who murdered strangers for pleasure and profit was almost unthinkable. After him, the world knew such men existed. More than a century later, the story of H. Holmes still spreads. Books, documentaries and films return to the castle again and again. People are still drawn to the image of the polite doctor who built a house designed for death, while the rest of the city celebrated light and progress. His story forces a hard question. How many other smiling strangers have walked among us, unnoticed, while the world looked the other way? The World's Fair of 1893 promised a future of wonders. Electric lights, new machines, a better world. In the shadow of that promise, one man proved how easily darkness can hide inside progress. H. Holmes did not look like a monster. He looked like a gentleman. That is why his rise still startles us. The most dangerous killers are not always the ones who frighten us on sight. Sometimes they are the ones who make us feel safe, right until the door locks behind us.